Dragon Ball Z and Super share many issues. I'm tired of Z worshippers. So, I love Dragon Ball. I'm a massive fan of Dragon Ball. I have been for years. But this series has some prevailing issues, multiple of which are not unique to Dragon Ball Super, despite what some people say. So this is going to be a little more of a ranty vent kind of thing, talking about Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super, and the Dragon Ball fanbase. But I have an actual series of points and an argument that I am making. This isn't just a complete rant. I am going to be a little bit harsher here, which is kind of why I'm putting it more into the rant, vent kind of thing. But please always remember to be civil and treat people with respect when you're disagreeing and calling out people's behavior. I always aim to not insult people. I want to be honest and constructive in my opinions without being confrontational. But sometimes you gotta let stuff out and be direct. With that said, in my opinion, many Dragon Ball Z worshippers are obnoxious hypocrites who are hyper-fixated on a romanticized version of Z and a demonized version of Super. That's what I'm here to talk about today. So, to be clear, loving Z on its own does not make you a worshipper. A worshipper is someone who acts like Z is perfect, who treats Z like it's the holy Bible of fiction, and refuses to not compare Z and Super every 5 seconds they indulge in Dragon Ball content. My main argument is that many of the points people criticize Super over are also present in Z. But because they romanticize Z so much, they don't realize this and attribute it just to Super. The reason why I feel it's important to bring this up, because in my opinion, these people have never stopped being annoying. Even after 5 years of Dragon Ball Super being over, and almost 10 years since it started, which is crazy to think about that it's been 10 years, people are still leaving the same super bad Z good comments on clips from Z and Super. I still see these. It's inescapable, and as a member of this community, it is impossible for me to ignore. After years of these same arguments, it is very frustrating to be a Dragon Ball fan sometimes. So, I'll be bringing up specific points of discourse around Super, and giving my thoughts on how Super and Z share a lot of these same issues, these same criticisms that people are making. So let's start with some of the writing choices and plot related type things of Super. Some of the criticisms of Super are just people misunderstanding things and not paying attention to the details. And even years later, there are still people bringing up these things in an incorrect fashion. The biggest one is people saying Goku endangered everyone by giving Zeno the idea for the Tournament of Power. But if you fully paid attention and knew all the details, you would know that Zeno was planning to erase all the universes involved before the Tournament of Power idea came up. Tournament of Power meant at least one universe would be saved, and that opened an opportunity for that universe to save the rest. Goku's insistence on the tournament saved all those universes from destruction. It seemed stupid in the moment initially, but it worked out for the best in the end. Want to know another scene that is very stupid in the moment, but also ended up being good in the end? Goku giving Cell a senzu bean, so he would be back at full strength to wail on Gohan more easily. Everyone still dogs, one of the few things in Z that I would say people do actually dog on sometimes. Don't forget about that. That was also very stupid in the moment, but did it work out in the best in the end? Yes, it did. Let's argue that Goku's promoting of the Tournament of Power was unintentionally beneficial. Rather than with Cell getting the senzu bean, you could argue that's more planned, because it was Goku's intention to unlock Gohan's hidden power and that would lead them to victory. And therefore, it shouldn't count in Goku's favor for not being an idiot in Super. Then you should also consider Goku an idiot in Z, for not killing Fat Boo when he could have, just so Goten and Trunks could have a turn and a chance to save the world. Which, like Cell, doing that brought more risk to everyone. Besides, the argument of his perceived dangerous desire for the Tournament of Power being out of character is just incorrect, in my opinion. This is very consistent for him throughout Z and Super. This is who Goku is. Goku endangered people all the time for his own desires. He let Vegeta go just so he could fight him again. He didn't know that Vegeta wouldn't go around destroying or conquering more planets in the meantime. He did not know that he would turn. He recognized that the Saiyans were conquerors and killers, and that Vegeta deserved to be killed. He said this to Krillin. But his selfish desire, which he directly admits, to himself and verbally to the audience, his selfish desire to fight Vegeta again won out. He prioritized his desire to fight him again over the safety of the universe. He also let Frieza go out of pity, even though he truly believed Frieza was evil, unlike most of the characters in Dragon Ball. Even if his spirit was broken, how do you know he wouldn't work out that misery by hurting more people? He didn't. Goku did not want to kill him, so he initially tried not to. It's that simple. With both Vegeta and Frieza, he put the universe at risk just because he did not want them dead for his own reasons. There's also the time Goku tells Vegeta, like I mentioned before, that he could have defeated Fat Buu as Super Saiyan 3, but he chose not to. Yet again, he put the world at risk for his own desires. And unlike with Gohan and Cell, this did not work out according to plan. Goten and Trunks could not defeat Buu in that moment and his plan backfires. And that caused all the craziness that is the rest of the Buu saga. Goku is not a perfect Paragon character who only acts in the best interest of the universe. He never was. Let's argue that Goku believes in not dealing with threats efficiently so people can grow from combat. He wanted to fight Vegeta again to better himself, and he wanted Goten and Trunks to fight Buu so they can better themselves. He believes in the growth that comes from combat. So, does that not also work for the Tournament of Power? Does it not make sense for him to want to grow by encountering all these different fighters? Even if that brings some risk by whatever stakes come from the tournament? Feel that Goku wanting a universal tournament, even though the gods recommend against it, fits his character. Krillin said leaving Vegeta alive would be a bad idea, but Goku stuck to his desire anyway. Beerus and the others thought the Tournament of Power would be a bad idea, but Goku went for it anyway. King Kai warns Goku not to get in a fight with Beerus, but he did it anyway. He has the drive to protect people, but at his core, he is a guy who loves to fight and grow from that experience. And he pushes that onto other people, which often brings risk. This fits for the Cell Saga, or he gives Cell a senzu bean because he believes fighting Cell at full power will bring out Gohan's potential. He took his own desire and he pushed that onto Gohan. That's the whole point of that. The whole point of that. That was Goku's problem. That's what he was working through. That's the point. This is what he does. And Goku generally doesn't change as a person that much. Even though healing Cell put everyone at greater risk, he chose to do that. Because at its core, what he wanted to do was not to defeat Cell, he wanted to see Gohan's full potential. That's what Goku wanted. And so that's what he makes happen. He does want to protect people from evil, but the forefront of his character is desiring to fight and grow as a fighter. I think this is a very consistent characterization. And throughout the series, we see this bring risk. To me, this is who adult Goku is. In my opinion, this is pretty consistent characterization from Z to Super. It's not like in the Cell Saga after what happened with Gohan, he suddenly stopped acting like this. He didn't. He does it in the Buu Saga as well. Goku's character is up to personal interpretation, of course. This is just my opinion, but this is how I see him. He's a guy who loves to fight and loves to grow, and he is willing to bring risk to himself and to others for that desire. That's who Goku is. So, on to another point, let's talk about power scaling, which, in my opinion, has always been awful. It's never been good. This series, past the first few arcs of Dragon Ball, is filled with random power-ups and twists that flip the scale of who is strong and who isn't in that moment. No one complains about Goku and Vegeta going from completely outclassed by Buhan to easily overpowering him after Potara fusion. That ridiculous flip in the scales, everyone's fine with. But when Kale and Caulifla are completely outclassed by Goku, then overpowers him by Potara fusion, suddenly it's stupid that Potara has a ridiculous multiplier. Fusion has always been a way for two people to turn the tides against a seemingly unstoppable enemy. That's how it's used narratively. This goes for the fusion dance too. Goten and Trunks didn't stand a semblance of a chance against Buu, the various forms that they fought, but they fused so they could at least be justified to put up a fight. Goku and Vegeta, talk about another moment, could not take down Janemba individually, but after fusing, they effortlessly destroyed him. Zamasu and Goku Black were individually too weak to fight Goku and Vegeta, so they fused to get the upper hand. And that flips the tides, then Goku and Vegeta do the same, and then they flip the tides. Fusion has always been used as a way for weaker characters to dramatically overcome their opponent. This is and was always bad and inconsistent from a power scaling perspective. It's been like this since Z. Super did not change that. Super also did not ruin the Super Saiyan forms. The impact of Super Saiyan was ruined long before Super. Obviously the peak is at Z because that's when it's introduced, but it has its issues in Z as well. That's not a Super problem. Like with the previous point, characters in Dragon Ball Z and Super often get new transformations when the story demands it, so that the characters can be relevant. Not always when they have a good plot or character-driven reason for it. Some do, like Goku and Future Trunks. Those scenes are fantastic. Everyone knows why. If you're a Dragon Ball fan, you know why those scenes are awesome. I've never heard a single person ever saying those scenes aren't awesome. But not all of them are like that. Many people are, for some reason, or they just don't talk about it, totally fine with Goten and Trunks not having any interesting or emotional reason to go Super Saiyan. It just randomly happens while they were casually training with Chi-Chi, at least with Goten. But when Caulifla goes Super Saiyan without any interesting or emotional reason, suddenly then the hype of Super Saiyan is being ruined. Dingly back is dumb. It is very dumb. Absolutely, I agree with you on that. But are you seriously arguing that, I don't know, it just happened, lol, is satisfying and worthy of the Super Saiyan transformation with Goten? It's not. If you want to argue the prodigy point in favor of Goten and Trunks, then that also works for Kale and Caulifla, because they were also stated to be prodigies. Both of these, with all four of these characters I mentioned, these are unsatisfying uses of characters becoming Super Saiyans, both in Z and in Super. Super Saiyans go Super Saiyan when the story demands Saiyans keep up with the most recent enemies. Goten and Trunks had to be able to go Super Saiyan, because you could not justify them being strong enough to do anything in the Buu Saga if they did not. Another point in a similar vein, Caulifla going Super Saiyan 2 fairly easily was also complained about. You know who also got a higher Super Saiyan form very easily, in a way that undercuts the effort of the other potentially characters who achieve it through hard work or emotional suffering? Gotenks, going Super Saiyan 3 after seeing it done by Goku one time. Why? Because the people they have to fight are so strong that they needed it to be relevant. Super Saiyan was downgraded from being a big deal before back in Z, in the Buu Saga. Power-ups that undercut the impact of previous ones is not a Super issue. It's a Dragon Ball issue. And now moving on from that to a different point, but people also bring up with Super, I would argue the biggest one, is art. Let's talk about art quality. Super has very inconsistent and mediocre art. It has a lot of that over its run, with some frames in particular looking especially bad, like the ones you know. I'm not even putting them on screen or anything, you know. Super has poorer visuals overall, compared to Z. I will never argue against that point. But the glazing of Z's art as a whole is very much a thing. Have y'all actually rewatched Z recently, outside of the big hype moments that you watch clips of on YouTube over and over again? If you haven't, then you've probably forgotten about the times of very bad and inconsistent art that is present in Z. Let's look at some of that. Z did not have consistently good art. It was passed between different studios frequently and at times under very severe time crunch, such as in the Namek Saga, with I would say the most infamous ones that I'm showing on screen right now. Vegeta is ridiculously off model, to the point that it barely even looks like him. In this picture, you could easily convince someone that this is a different Saiyan, like you'd see in the background of Planet Vegeta flashbacks. There were various artists and teams handling DBZ over the show, and that resulted in things like this happening. This is bad, plain and simple. This isn't good just because it's from Z. This sucks. If people are going to pick out minor bad moments in Super, then we are allowed to do that for DBZ as well. Here's some more mediocre shots, and these specifically from the Cell Saga. The Cell Saga has some of the best art in the whole series. Fights like Goku vs. Cell are gorgeous. But these are also from the Cell Saga, because Z also had inconsistent art. It has moments that look terrible. And a lot of these aren't single shots, like that Trunks. Like this really funny Trunks one. They held on this. These are examples of the characters being off model or they're badly proportioned, etc. There are just like there are many bad frames in Super that people pick out and beat to death, there are ones that we can do that with Z too. Z does not look perfect 100% of the time. Your memory might make you think might make you think that it does, but I'm sorry, it does not. Especially when you pause it. Super is the same way. Even if the overall art quality is worse, people need to acknowledge that the inconsistent art is a very consistent Dragon Ball problem. There are some very mediocre looking parts of the Future Saga, of Super, for example, but there are also parts that look fantastic, like the sections directed by Naotoshi Shida. Z and Super were both long-running anime that had inconsistent art that ranged from ugly, off proportion, etc., to looking beautiful and absolutely gorgeous. Z and Super both had times where less skilled artists were working on the show, and the product was rushed, with the art quality and consistency of the models and stuff like that suffering for it. Even though it happens more often in Super than in Z, people should not act like it does not happen at all. It is crazy that nearly a decade later, we still have people bringing up frames from the very beginning of Super and then acting like Z never had similar issues. It did. What I'm trying to argue here is that you can dislike Super, that's fine, but stop being a hypocrite and acting like they don't share a lot of these issues. You can like Z better than Super. That's totally fine. I respect your opinion. And I agree. That is fine. My problem is not people criticizing either show, or people making an argument that one part of Dragon Ball is better than the other. Just, if you're curious, the original Dragon Ball anime is my favorite. You can have issues with power scaling, visuals, writing, etc. of either show. I'm not arguing people's issues with Super are invalid. The problem is pointing out the flaws of Super and completely ignoring those same flaws being present in Z. That's the point I'm making here. It is supercritical and it is ignorant, plain and simple. Some people need to be able to take off their nostalgia goggles and look at all of Dragon Ball more comprehensively if you want to engage in these type of debates. In my opinion, many of the problems people talk about in Super, saying things that they think are problems, are really Dragon Ball problems. And I'm tired of hearing about these problems be brought up just against Super. I really hope Daima coming out and so far looking really great will change this. Hope we can all just move on. I want the Z worshippers to move on with their lives and get over Z ending and them not enjoying Super as much as they would have liked and as much as other people did. At least properly watch Z and Super again if you're going to act like you are an expert on the finer details. Because if you think that all these issues are not present in Z, then you are not paying enough attention to Z. At least come up with new material and things that are properly substantiated and not hypocritical if you want to engage in this type of discourse and not just beat the same points over and over again. The horse is dead, let's move on. So, I am concluding here. Thank you very much for listening. My goal with this, again, is not to piss people off. It's not to hate on anybody. It's only a little bit because people are being obnoxious. And sometimes you need to call out obnoxious behavior. So, this is what kind of Dragon Ball fan I am, if you're curious. I do plan to talk about Dragon Ball more in the future, because again, despite all of the criticisms I just laid on the series, I do love this series deeply. So, I do plan to talk about it more. If you interested in that, interested in checking out my website, that's also in the blog, in the description. Please check that out and stick around. Like, follow, subscribe, etc. Thank you very much. Let's make the Dragon Ball community a nice one.